We have arrived at Tuol Sleng Genocide Museum. Some of you are familiar with what happened there, but this place is a place of absolute horrific atrocities that will just destroy your brain. It's hard to even talk about or hear about. That's how bad it was. Well, this was originally a high school, but the Khmer Rouge turned it into a torture and holding area, and it was brutal what they did. Absolutely brutal. 20,000 people are estimated to have gone through. 12 survived. Now, the vast majority were obviously Khmer people that went through here, but there were around 80 foreigners that went through, and none of them made it out. None of them survived. And the way people were killed here was just brutal. I mean, the worst type of torture you can think of, they did it here, as well as medical experiments, up to and including bleeding people out alive, doing surgeries on them without any anesthetic. I'm just gonna sit in the shade and have a few moments of silence. It really is hard to try to fathom that just like over 40 years ago, this peaceful place where you hear birds chirping, people sitting around. Everybody here's got the headphones on. They're listening to the audio tour. I've already read pretty extensively about this place, so I decided to pass on the audiobook tour, but it's hard to fathom that at one point in time, this was one of the most horrific places on earth. I mean, people were being beaten, cut, tortured, bled to death, having their fingernails ripped out and alcohol poured into the wounds, starved, shocked, electric shocks, whipped, everything, and a whole lot worse than that. Just walked into one of the first prison cells here, / torture chamber. And one thing they do that I think is very important, they put the list of the prisoners who were detained in each specific room. They put a plaque out here so you can see it. The people, their age, and when they were entered into this. Now, all these people here were in this specific cell. Here's another one of these torture chambers, and you can see stains on the floor, and you can guess what that came from. And this is the exact same bed frame that was here at the time. Yeah, this place went from being a place of education, a high school, to a prison and torture camp by the Communist Party of Cambodia at the time. They've got the camp rules posted up here on the sign. They're pretty intense. Number 1, you must answer according to my questions. Don't turn them away. Number 2, don't try to hide the facts by making excuses about this or that. You are strictly prohibited to contradict me. Number 3, don't pretend to be ignorant, for you are a chap who dares to thwart the revolution. Number 4, you must answer my questions immediately without wasting time to reflect. Number 5, do not go on about your minor mistakes or infringements of the moral code or on the essence of the revolution. Number 6, while getting lashes or electrification, you must absolutely not scream or cry out. That would be impossible. Number 7, do nothing, sit still and wait for my orders. If there is no order, keep quiet, and when I tell you to do something, you must do it right away without protesting. Number 8, don't make pretext about Kampuchea-Krum in order to hide your secrets or your betrayals. Number 9, if you don't scrupulously follow all of the above rules, you shall get many lashes or electric shocks. For every infringement, 10 lashes or 5 shocks. Now, where does China fit into all this? Because China had their great cultural revolution, right? They had their whole communist revolution. Well, the reality is that Cambodia wanted to do something similar. Pol Pot wanted a similar kind of revolution. He wanted to wipe out the culture, have a cleansing, and by cleansing, I mean eliminating all the intellectuals, anybody who had worked for previous administrations in the country, and anyone who was just questioned, if their loyalty was questioned in any way, or if they were guilty of the slightest infringement, they would be eliminated. Well, the reality is the Khmer Rouge was fully supported by China, and China helped them with training and gave them their full support, which is just truly mind-blowing. And it's something I don't hear many people talk about. Another interesting observation and realization that I've had is that Cambodia had their communist revolution, as did China. But Cambodia has put this out there for the world to see, the atrocities and the horrors that took place here. Now, in China, a lot of very bad things happened too, but you would not find a museum like this to show and openly discuss what had happened. We've got pictures of a lot of the victims from here. And there's a lot. Walls and walls and walls full. It's really hard to look at their faces and see the expression on some of them. And here are a ton of the female victims. It just twists my brain in a knot to think about how this went from being what was probably a very beautiful high school campus when it was first built. Happy students everywhere, walking around, laughing, learning, having a lot of good times. And then just seeing the transformation of what this place became. It became one of the most notoriously horrific places on the planet. You know, kids would come out, you can see these shuttered windows. They'd finish class, come out here into this little walkway, look out, and I mean, look at this beautiful view that they would have had. I mean, originally, this would have been a really nice high school. A lot better than mine, I can tell you that. But just look how terrifying this is. And they've got pictures of a lot of the victims. I just showed a very, very, very small fraction of them. And some of the pictures are pretty brutal, pretty graphic. I can't show them on YouTube. But I came here a long, long time ago. And I remember it from then, and I'm experiencing now. This place really takes a lot out of me emotionally. It's hard not to get choked up when you look at those pictures, especially when you look into the eyes of the victims here. I guess this would have initially been a blackboard for the school, but look what they've done with this room. Little mini cells. I mean, even as a museum where there's a lot of other people in it, it's still scary. I'm just gonna walk into one of these so you guys can kind of feel what it would have felt like from the prisoner's perspective to be locked up in here. This would have been your home. And the best time of your day would have been when you were actually being left alone. Because when visitors came, things were gonna get bad. And this is it. Initially, I didn't plan on buying any souvenirs or books or anything here, but saw a couple guys sitting there selling books, and let me show you what I saw. They were selling this book. Well, these two boys here are child survivors of this place. There weren't many. There were only, I think there were 5 kids that survived total. These 2 kids did. And these guys are brothers. I just met them. So I wasn't going to not buy their book. Before I could even finish my last little video clip there, guess who I bumped into? This guy. One of the 7 adult survivors from there. And again, I couldn't not buy his book. He was sitting right there. He's old. He's getting older. He's getting a little, forgetful and stuff. He was sitting right there, and his family members are with him, and so I had to buy one. So what put an end to the terrible things that were happening here? Because the people here didn't have a chance. There was no way. There was nothing they could do. Well, Vietnam, their eastern neighbor, got wind of what was going on, and they brought their forces in here, and they shut down the Khmer Rouge, thus bringing an end to the atrocities happening here. So I haven't talked to a local about their feelings regarding Vietnam, but I would have to imagine that, at least especially on that point, there's got to be some special kind of feelings of gratitude or something. I don't even know how you articulate it. Before I leave Cambodia, maybe that's a question I should ask somebody today, and maybe this would be the right place to do it. Well, I figured, who better to ask than a survivor of this particular, one of the deadliest camps that they had, prison camps that they had during the reign of the Khmer Rouge. Oh, and by the way, this was one of anywhere between 150 to 200 of these kind of places. So I went back and I asked one of the survivors, the older brother, because he speaks a bit of English, and I was asking him, how do they feel about Vietnam here? Because Vietnam, you know, came in and helped him out to get out of this. He said there's mixed feelings, you know, because there were aspects from Vietnam, there were elements within Vietnam supporting the Khmer Rouge, and he also mentioned about, you know, China's support of the Khmer Rouge, and he showed me a picture of a Chinese troop training the Khmer Rouge. You know, getting it right from the horse's mouth like that, that's, you know, there's nobody I could ask that could give a more credible answer than that. The older brother, that first book I bought, they were child survivors. The older brother is the one that I was just speaking to about it. So, what did they do with the dead here at Tuol Sleng? Well, they buried them. And it wasn't long before they ran out of room because there were so many dead bodies. You know, there were rooms in there where you could see cabinets with glass panes, and on the shelves were just human skulls stacked upon human skulls, and then boxes of human bones. I mean, real ones right there, just in that museum that I was in. So we finished that. I'm in a tuk-tuk, and now we're going to the killing fields where they had a lot of mass graves. So here we are, the killing fields. You may have seen a movie by the name. If you haven't, I highly suggest that you watch it. It's in these fields, these killing fields of Cambodia, that approximately 1 million people were killed and buried in mass graves. And I believe in here there were estimated to be about 20,000 mass graves. Well, the first thing I saw when I walked in here are some chickens feeding. It's weird when you walk in places like this, just like Tuol Sleng, and now here, Choeung. It's hard to imagine what was once happening. A lot of death, a lot of atrocity happened here. And another stupa, I'm assuming to pay tribute to the multitudes of fallen victims. Would you please kindly show your respect to many million people who were killed under the genocidal Pol Pot regime? Well, many millions. So Cambodia had a population roughly of 8 million, and it's estimated that about 2 million died during the 4-year reign of the Khmer Rouge. Only 4 years. But that was a long 4 years. A quarter of their population perished in the worst ways you could possibly imagine. That's 1 in 4. It's really hard to fathom that. And here's something talking about where I just came from. Here it was, the place where victims were transported from Tuol Sleng and other places in the country to be detained. Usually when the truck arrived, the victims were executed immediately. Someday, as the number of victims to be executed was increased up to over 300 per day, executioners failed in attempt to kill them within a day. That is why they were detained for execution the next day. The detention was constructed from wood with galvanized steel roof. Its wall was built with 2 layers of flat wood, were to darken and also prevent prisoners from seeing each other. Unfortunately, the dark and gloomy detention was dismantled in 1979. There you go. Like I was saying earlier, originally they were burying people right outside of Tuol Sleng, but the areas where they could bury the bodies filled up too quickly, so they needed other areas, and now you ended up with places like this. Some of the graves had just a few, but some of them I believe had up to like 100 people in them. There's a lot going on with this tree here. Now this was the location where they kept the killing tools, and you can see what they used. Shackles, leg irons, a hatchet, knives, hose, digging hose, shovels, iron ox cart axles, and other things. And then over here is one of the mass graves. Apparently this one had 450, roughly. Just in this one mass grave alone. I was reading earlier about what they would do to some of these, a lot of these, probably most of these victims, when they would bring them out to these places to be killed. Instead of like just putting a bullet in the head or something, they would just bludgeon them and just brutalize them until they died. One reason was to save on ammunition costs. because it was more expensive to you know, shoot them. But it was free to just bludgeon them, you know. Couple little, hello. As soon as I greeted those little kids, he said hello, and then he put his hands out begging for money. So just be aware of that. If you greet them or wave or something, just be friendly. Expect to be asked for money. And it doesn't feel good, you know, just walking away from a kid who's obviously poor, giving them nothing, you know. But you can't give to everybody. Well, some of you can, I guess, if you're loaded with money, but it's not really that realistic of an option. So let's talk about costs. Tuol Sleng, S-21, the high school turned prison and torture camp that I was in first, that you guys just saw. That ticket was $5, but I did not choose the audio tour option. You saw everybody there, pretty much everybody had headphones on and they were listening. It was like a guided audio tour, which would be great. But they do have signs and placards kind of explaining things, and I just, like I said, I decided not to do it. So $5 for that ticket, that's without audio. And then here, it's $6 for the audio tour, but only $3 for just admission, like I got it. So for the tour of both places, it's only $8. It only cost me $8. Now the tuk-tuk ride to get here was $15, and it was about a 40-minute trip. Hey buds, these dogs, I hope they're nice. It was about 40 minutes to get here, but the driver's waiting for me, and he's gonna drive me back to my hotel after this finishes, which is a long trip. So I'm getting like an hour and a half worth of drive from that tuk-tuk driver for $15. So that's, to me, that's totally acceptable. And the fact that he's just waiting for me while I'm here. And they don't try to get you to pay it up front. They expect you to pay after the work is all done, so you don't have to worry about them trying to cheat you or anything. There was a sign on the other side of this place, and it was saying that they would put DDT on the bodies in the mass graves to, one of the reasons was to hide the smell so people around wouldn't know what was going on. Because, you know, the stench of rotting corpses, that smell would carry, and you know, it would raise suspicion. So yeah, I'm guessing that was probably a mass grave too. You see a lot of places that looks kind of like a meteorite hit, and that you would have to expect that would be an excavated mass grave. I walked right up to the fence here on the perimeter, and you got some cows over there grazing. There's a bunch of his buddies over there. Ever since I started traveling, I always had a soft spot in my heart for Cambodia and the people here, because, I mean, the stuff they've been through, even prior to Pol Pot, things were not good. It was just one problem after the next, constant political upheaval and problems. They ran into a lot of bad luck as well. But you know, despite what they went through, which is amongst the worst of any country in recent history, they don't complain about it. They smile, they're friendly. From what I see, it looks like they work hard, they hustle. You know, they've treated me nothing but kindly, and it really does just give me a special impression of them as a people and as a country. You gotta love how these regimes, like these communist regimes, always try to call themselves democratic. Never will we forget the crimes committed during the democratic Kampuchea regime. Democratic, just like North Korea, and even China is trying to say that they're a form of democracy. So it's pretty rich, isn't it? Now that is an interesting and beautiful looking tree. Look at the growth on that. Now if you want to get out here to the killing fields, it's a little trip, you know. Like I said, it was about a 40-minute ride out here, and you can see we're in a pretty rural area. The whole point of today's video was to show and really highlight the sad history, especially sad recent history, that Cambodia has faced. So you might be wondering, why am I here at this Buddhist temple? It's called Wat Botum. Why am I here? Because this is a place of peace and learning and, you know, enlightenment. Well, here's something you guys may not know. Salath Sar, who later changed his name to Pol Pot, used to be a novice monk right here at this very temple. It was later when he moved overseas to France that he changed and became radicalized, joined the Communist Party. But in his early days, he grew up in a privileged family, and he was going to choose the path of peace and enlightenment. But he changed and chose the path of communism, death and destruction. But long before that, this was his place of study. So here you can see some monks working on decorating their monastery. And just across the street from Wat Botum, where Salath Sar, aka Pol Pot, used to be a novice monk, you'll see the Cambodia-Vietnam Friendship Monument. And this is quite a sight to behold. Let's see what it says. The Cambodia-Vietnam Friendship Monument was built as a testimonial of gratitude and in memory of the sacrifice of Cambodian people in the cause of Vietnam's territorial unification during the 60s and 70s, and the sacrifice of Vietnamese army and people in the liberation of Cambodian people from the genocidal regime of Democratic Kampuchea in the 70s and 80s. The interesting thing about all this is that just over there you can see the monastery, Wat Botum, where Pol Pot studied when he was very young, and he later pursued the path of communism, death and destruction, revolution. And it was that man's ideas and actions that led to all of the horrific things that took place in this country. And just across the street, it's kind of like everything comes full circle, because Vietnam helped to end the Pol Pot Khmer Rouge regime. So the guy who started the whole thing, once upon a time, was just over there. But then a few decades later, after a lot of damage had been done, some of the darkest pages in recent history had been written, millions had lost their lives, stands this monument as a testimonial of Vietnam's help and as a token of Cambodia's appreciation for helping them to end that really sad, nightmarish period of their history. This is my friend. He helped me a lot today. If you come to Cambodia, you find him. He's good. So we're gonna get him a drink. He's on the clock, so he can't have a beer, but we're gonna get him a Coca-Cola, and then we'll have to say our goodbyes. It's a cute little girl.